Sad tweet this week goes to former Ring of Honor star, current AEW employee BJ Whitmer. I wouldn't even mention this, but since he posted about it himself, this qualifies for sad tweet this week. BJ Whitmer, who married the now former Women of Honor champion in ROH, Kelly Klein, 3 years ago, and stuck up for her during her recent spat with Ring of Honor management, backed up some of her claims, dutifully defending his wife, until he recently learned that she was, according to him, cheating on him. She was going outside of the marriage. And he posted this statement on Twitter. He said, "My wife, Kelly Klein, and I are divorcing. This is happening because Kelly breached the trust in our relationship by stepping outside of our marriage. This is the only thing I have to say about the matter. This has been a very difficult time for myself and my family. News of our split was already spreading around the business, and I wanted to make a statement before it made it to social media or wrestling media." Now, we only have his side of the story so far, but if it's true, well, I guess Kelly Klein wasn't a woman of honor after all. After this, AEW, it seems like as a potential landing spot for her, would kind of be a little bit awkward. A little bit awkward. I'm not one to sit here and say, well, she could never end up in AEW now. Is she good enough to even go to AEW? Would AEW benefit by having her on the roster? I heard all this great talk about Dr. Britt Baker, who comes across as a bigger star. She's got this great story. She's wrestling, and she's simultaneously running her own dental practice. I'm not impressed when I see her on television each week and I watch her in the ring. I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting to see what the big deal is. Kelly Klein, would she be any better than Dr. Britt Baker? Would that women's division really be strengthened by her presence? I don't know. But I'm not one to sit here and say, well, she can't go to AEW because of something that happened in her personal life with someone who happens to work in the same company. Yeah, it would be awkward, but she also shouldn't be shut out of a job because of it, I don't think. But it would seem that that could potentially close one door for her. This also does not make some of the things that she and Joey Mercury said about ROH any less true, especially the things for which Mercury provided evidence of and screenshots for. And those issues should still be addressed. If there's a concern that at some of the shows there isn't the kind of medical help that there needs to be. And, they talked about the situation with Jay Lethal when he broke his arm and other people getting hurt and some of the things that had to be done in lieu of getting actual medical attention to them as quickly as possible. If that's happening, then those things need to be addressed. And it's good that they shined a light on that. So just because this whole thing here has now just devolved into a total shit show should not negate all of the things that Kelly Klein and Joey Mercury were talking about. Now, I don't know who she allegedly cheated on BJ Whitmer with, nor do I care. But one sign may be the alleged text message that Witmer sent to Joey Mercury from apparently somebody else's phone a few weeks ago, where Witmer evidently told Mercury, "Go kill yourself, you worthless drug-addled fuck." That's an exact quote from the screenshot. He sounds a tad bit upset, though, doesn't he? He sounds a little bit upset there in that text message. So I don't know if that is an answer for anything or not. Mercury has since been suspended. His account has been suspended by Twitter. I don't know why. Maybe he doxed someone. I don't know what he may have done. Reality is stranger than fiction sometimes. Yeah, this may be more Jerry Springer-like than that wedding on Raw last week. There's actually quite a few options for a sad tweet this week. I also could have gone with Jim Cornette for threatening to quite literally strangle Bruce Mitchell of the Pro Wrestling Torch if he ever saw him in person. Now, he's been threatening Mitchell for probably over 25 years now, since the Smoky Mountain days. This is nothing new. He does not like this man. He even told him straight up on Twitter, "I don't like you. And basically, if you and I ever end up in the same place, you're going to find my hand around your throat." He's not too bright putting these threats out there so blatantly on social media, but that's what Cornette does. I think people just kind of are used to it and they kind of brush it off, but he did threaten to basically strangle Bruce Mitchell. So that happened. That was a thing this week. This also was a thing. This other sad tweet that I want to address very briefly here, since my name got dragged into this. It comes from Corey Graves, who was promoting his latest podcast with Renee Young and Michael Cole as his guests. I have not listened to it, but I did read a transcript of the Cole interview, and it actually sounds like a really good one. I may have to listen to, I'll find time hopefully in the next few days to actually listen to the Cole portion at least. Especially the stuff where Cole talks about the lead up and the build up to his match with Jerry Lawler at WrestleMania 27, and how they were rehearsing that day, earlier that day, in the ring at the building. I think they were at the Georgia Dome, I believe, that year. So they're in the ring rehearsing for their match earlier in the day, and CM Punk, out of nowhere, catches Cole with a totally random running knee, right to the jaw, and he knocked out Cole's front tooth, which, Punk very quickly, I'm so sorry, he apologized for it, he said he offered to pay for his dental work. I'm trying to picture this in my head. Did Punk just not know that Cole was there, and he just randomly goes running around the ring with flying knees? I need I need some kind of, I don't know, some kind of reenactment of this. I'm trying to visualize this in my head, and I laugh. It's funny every single time I try to think about how this actually happened. But Cole was very worried because he was calling the show on commentary up to the point that he had to get in the ring and wrestle. So he was pulling double duty that night. He was commentating and he was wrestling. He was performing, or I don't know if wrestling is the word I would use for what he did, but he was performing in the ring that night. So he was very worried. I have a missing tooth now. What the hell am I going to do? Which I guess they got it fixed up. And then apparently during the match, he claims that Lawler on a drop kick knocked his other front tooth out. Now, I have no interest in going back and reliving that match. I'll take him at his word. Someone replied to a tweet that Graves posted. He was promoting the episode. And someone replied with a tweet tagging, I think it was Wade Keller, Joe Cronin, and myself. And he said that I would rather listen to, these three guys talk about wrestling and not some WWE company shill. I don't advocate doing that. The man is tweeting stuff from his own account and then tweeting him and having nothing to do with what he's tweeting about. The man has his own show to promote. If you want to listen to somebody else, I don't think you got to rub it in the guy's face. But thank you. I'm glad you enjoy my content. I think that's awesome. But I don't think you need to start doing shit like that. But Corey responded. He took the bait and he responded. And he said, I'm sure they would actually love to work for the company. I'm sorry you hate truth. And I love this mentality that everybody who either watches WWE or I guess talks about WWE, does a radio show, if you're like one of the Busted Open guys, or if you have a podcast, if you have a YouTube show, I can tell you that there are plenty of podcasters and YouTubers and people who write articles on wrestling news websites who would give their left nut to work for WWE. There's a lot of people out there who aspire to one day draw a paycheck from the very man that they bash every single week and seem to utterly despise, but they would happily take a check signed by Vince McMahon. So he's not totally wrong in the idea that there are people like that do exist. But the way, this tweet, I read this tweet that I'm tagged in, and I just love this mentality that whoever you are, if you're talking about WWE, you must aspire to work for WWE. The only reason that you're even doing this is because one day you're going to get that phone call, you're going to get that direct message, you're going to get your foot in the door somehow. Maybe you can deliver coffee, to the folks in the tower. Maybe that's how you get your foot in the door. Everybody must feel this way. It was his dream. It was Corey's dream to work for WWE, and now he does. And so it must be everyone else's dream too. So I will repeat what I said on Twitter. I said, Corey, don't be an ass. I am quite content doing my own thing. I have 2 jobs, actually 3, but I have 2 jobs right now that are keeping me very busy. Busier than I would like to be. But they do a very good job of paying the bills. I assure you, I am not lobbying for any more jobs. Anyone who has listened to this podcast, it's laughable to me that anybody who has listened to this podcast for any length of time, and I actually think I'm pretty fair and even-handed most of the time when it comes to talking about just stuff in general. Yeah, I get negative and I bash stuff when it deserves it. Not just for the sake of doing it, not because it's a gimmick. When there's stuff to praise, I praise, because I love wrestling. And when I hate wrestling, for whatever reason, and there are lots of times and lots of segments that make me rethink why the hell I even do this, guess what? I'm going to talk about it. And if that bothers people, too bad. Some of the things I've said, the people who have listened to these shows, the rants that I've gone on, really? When I do that, do I have it in my head, oh, I'm going to one day work for WWE? Really? Do you not listen to this show? I know Corey doesn't. But I'm talking in general. Like, come on. Boy, if I want to work for WWE, given some of the things I've said on this show, I'm doing a pretty piss poor job of it. I'm putting a pretty piss poor resume together for this fantasy position that doesn't exist. But it is nice of Corey to make assumptions about my career goals. I appreciate that. Now, he replied later on to somebody else. He said, I don't know Solomonster, like personally, I don't know Solomonster, aside from him making fun of me. And then in parentheses, he says, and sometimes rightfully so. At least he's self-aware. I'll give him that. At least he acknowledges that he deserves it sometimes. So I will leave you with this. Corey has his own show. He has his own show for WWE that he does. Let the man do his own thing. I have no issue with Corey Graves outside of the dumb comments that he makes sometimes. And when he does, I call him out for it, like I would anybody else. He is no different than anybody else. And this was another one of those times.